2:50 p.m. reading Sita and Draupadi today. If we can request the audience to please settle down so that we can announce our next session. By Your Name. Andre Aciman on the book, the screenplay, the film, and the sequel, in conversation with Malavika Banerjee. Andre is an American writer, a professor of comparative literature. His book, Call Me By Your Name, was adapted for screen in 2017 to both critical and popular acclaim. Malavika is the director of Kalam and a voracious reader. May I please have Andre and Mala up on stage, please? And now that I've called you by your names, I shall exit.
So there's a little short story that I shall start with, which is about trying to watch a movie before reading a great book. So I was on a flight, which was a 14-hour flight, and I saw Call Me by Your Name, and I said, let me watch this. So one elderly and rather firm lady next to me told me, have you read the book? Asked me, have you read the book? I said no. So she told me, watch the movie only after you've read the book. I was waiting for her to sleep so that I could start, but she didn't fall asleep. And finally, I thought I should just obey and read the book first. So that's how I discovered Call Me By Your Name. And thank you, Andre. Just a random email immediately after reading the book, and he responded within hours, and here he is. So thank you very much for making that 14-hour flight back here.
Thank you. I've taken that plane too, to be here. So thank you all for being here. Thank you for inviting me. I cannot begin to tell you what a pleasure it is to be in India. It's my first time in India, and let's hope that it's not the only one.
I'm sure it won't be. So I thought I'll divide, like the title of our session is the book, the movie, and a bit about the sequel. So you had written Out of Egypt, and the rest of your books don't really lead up immediately or predictably to Call Me By Your Name. So what took you to these two young boys in Italy in the 70s?
It's a complicated question you're asking, because you're asking what is the genesis of the book. And the genesis is itself because I was born in Egypt, and I lost Egypt. I can never go back. Oh, I can go back, but it's difficult for me to go back. And I've always used to spend my entire summers at our beach house on the sea. So I love the sea. And that, for some reason, got transplanted into Italy, where I wrote a story about a boy who likes to live by the sea. So that's what the difference is between memoirs and fiction. Fiction allows you to do anything you want. And in fact, every year we would go to Italy. My family from New York would go to Italy. We would rent a house, and we would spend some time in the house and travel in Italy. And that was a wonderful substitute for me for being in Egypt. Except that one summer we were not going to go to Italy. We had a change of plans. And therefore I was very frustrated, and I started writing about a house on the sea. And in the house on the sea, I wrote a paragraph. It felt okay. So I wrote a second paragraph. It felt okay too. And by the time I had 3 pages, I said, oh, okay, enough. We've sort of created the fiction of a house in Italy. And then I came back later in the day. I said, let's see where this can go. I had no idea. And I made it about a boy. It was me. And the boy lives in the house. And I said, okay, there's got to be a girl arriving in a cab, which made perfect sense. And then I said, no, we're not going to make it a girl. It's going to be another boy. and we'll see where that goes. And it was basically every day, it was a few pages, a little bit of progress, a bit of regress. I had no idea what I was doing until finally I realized that these two kids were in love with each other, and now I had to do something with that. And of course, I had a lot of inhibition. I said, what should they do together? You know, are they going to do it? Is Oliver going to die, which is an easy solution, so he doesn't have to do anything? And so it was really groping around for about 3 months. And the next thing I knew, I had written a novel. So it was totally unplanned, and there was no trajectory whatsoever.
So the language of the book, and as you mentioned just a little earlier, is very internal. It's all in the head, and yet it's also very visual and very sensuous. And I thought I'd made this amazing discovery by making parallels to Lolita, and you said it has been said before. Is it the seaside? Is it this slightly forbidden love?
It is, I think, it is the discovery. And it's a magical moment in everybody's life when you discover that there was friendship, there was parental love, there was food, there was beaches, there were great books, there was school, and if you're like me, you hated school, so it doesn't count. And these are the characters in your life. And suddenly you feel not only that somebody else is interesting, but that you feel this weird thing called desire for someone else. And at first, you don't know what the name of that desire is. You don't know where it comes from or what to do with it. And I wanted to capture that moment of the birth of something new. And the only way to do that was to narrate a story of a boy who is surrounded by sensual things. I should say sensuous things. There's a wonderful house, wonderful parents, a wonderful climate. Everything is wonderful. Wonderful servants. Everybody loves you. And suddenly this new intrusion in your life, and you want to understand it. And of course, part of you is dying to reject it, to hate it, because you're attracted to it. And you know there's something wrong, and you can't quite put your finger on it. And yet you are compelled to go there. And what I wanted to do is to map out as best as I could, the moment in which the kid, Elio, realizes that he is, in fact, attracted, and there's no denying it. And that comes quite suddenly at the beginning of the book, and it's all taking place in his head. So there is really very, very little plot in this novel.
Yes, there's no conflict, actually, other than what's inside Elio's head. So the character of Oliver, you know, he's this typically American, often brash,
Yes.
often inscrutable, extremely attractive young man. So we know Elio was created based on your memories, but what made Oliver who he is?
Well, people tell me, and this is something that everybody writes to me, and they say, why don't you write the novel again, but this time from Oliver's perspective? And my answer to that is saying Oliver would never write a book. Certainly not a book like that. He doesn't have the kind of personality. Frankly, people like Oliver are, for me, impenetrable. I don't understand how they think, how they feel. All I can do is react to what they do to me or to a character that is very much like me. And that's the only thing that I can do. Oliver is, for me, the cowboy. He is the super male, the confident, brash, as you said, male, and sometimes even arrogant. Says later, later. You know, nobody I know says later. I wouldn't like somebody who says later that way. So for me, he was a totally foreign character that I inducted into my book as best as I could.
And as I said, there's no conflict. So if you keep Elio at the center, there is the slightly brash character he's attracted to. But everyone else, and Oliver as well, are very nurturing and loving to him.
Yeah.
And one of the best passages in the book is at the end where the father, you know, speaks to him and helps him through that difficult and very tender moment in his life where he's necessarily going to have to let go of his first love. There's a tenderness that runs through the novel because there is no conflict. But what made that father character, both parents, but since he is the person who voices all that Elio's anguish is taking him through, what made that character for you?
I think, first of all, I think everybody is very kind in the book. I think in my universe, except for a few uncles that I hated and was not sorry to hear that they had died, but otherwise, everybody was extremely sweet. It doesn't mean that my childhood was easy, but there was a kind of tenderness throughout my childhood. And among them, my father, who was a very strict father, at the same time was very nurturing. And he is the kind of character that inspired me to write Call Me By Your Name, with that particular kind of father who basically is shocked by nothing. Nothing is forbidden. Everything is fine, and don't kill it either. So that you have a person who, people write to me all the time and they say, I wish my father, who is now dead, had written to me or spoken to me that way. Many people say, you know, you've given me hope because I hope that I can make my father react to me the way that your character, the father, reacted to Elio. And for me, it's a great deal of satisfaction to know that I don't intend to change the world. That's not going to happen. But I like the fact that many people are encouraged to become who they are and to be who they are vis-a-vis their parents, because the parents are the first step. If you can't go beyond the parents, then you have to go around them to your friends and everything like that, which makes things very complicated.
So the book differs from, most people have seen the movie as well.
I don't know how many of them have seen the movie. Okay, forget it.
And how many have read the book?
Oh my God, same number of people.
So the book moves ahead from where the movie, ends. So you move from this wonderful, sensuous, and exquisite seaside town into another. Both towns are very intellectual. I mean, they have an intellectual life, both scenarios. But how difficult was it then to reimagine these two characters a decade and a half down the line, when one is married, the other is coming to visit, and the dynamics then when he sees the photograph and all that follows?
I think that it wasn't difficult because I don't think that people change. People may try to change because they are full of defects, but I don't think we change. We remain the same people, and we continue to love and like the same people even when we have given up, even when they're gone from our lives. We don't get rid of anything. We just are carriers of baggage. And so I think that in the film, you have a winter scene, which is the end of the movie. But then what I decided to do, I said, I don't want this story to end. There is something else that has to happen. And so I kept going 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, and so on. And I love the idea that, in fact, they don't change. They just become a bit awkward with each other. And for those of you who are old enough to have had a love and then many years later have encountered the person that you were loved, there's a kind of, not inhibition, but it's a sense of awkwardness, and you don't know how to navigate that awkwardness, and you take it in stride, and then you discover that, wait a minute, there was no reason to be awkward. There's still affection between us. And then I didn't want to explore that because that would have been a far longer novel, and so I stopped.
And you're going to start again, but more about that later.
Okay.
So this novel was written 10 years ago. You've written other books in the interim. And how did the adaptation on screen come to be? How was it working with the director and with James Ivory, who many of us know well in the city?
I wrote a book. It was written, as I said, in 3 months and a half. I submitted it to my agent, and she immediately sold it. After sort of yelling at me because I wrote a gay book. She says, "Why did you write a gay book?" I said, "I don't know. It came that way, you know." And she said, "Okay, fine." So she read it. She loved it. She sold it.
Were you trying to write something else?
I was writing another novel at the same time. That's why, but it was a difficult novel because there was no sex in it. And, and try to avoid sex in a situation that is nothing but sexual, and it's all happening in their heads, which I also enjoyed. I mean, I enjoyed writing that, but it was very difficult. And people who later read that book when it came out said, I can't stand it. It goes for 8 nights. They meet every night and nothing happens. This is untenable. It's unbearable. So anyway, but to go back to Call Me By Your Name, about a year after the book had come out, somebody called me, said, I've spoken to your agent. She gave me your phone number. We would like to make a movie out of it. I said, movie? That had never crossed my mind. And I said, fine, go ahead. Yeah, you have my blessing. He kept me on the phone for 45 minutes. I said, it's okay. You know, I understand. You want to make a movie. You don't have to apologize. He's a lovely, lovely person. But he wanted to make sure that I was okay with it. And I was totally okay. And of course, then they found a script. The script was not very good. They had to redo it. And then they found a director, but the director was wonderful, but he had another assignment, so he basically abandoned the project. They found actors, some of them terrific actors whose name I knew. They had other parts, and so they had to abandon the project. And it took many, many years, about 6 years, for the movie to finally become a production. And there were 2 individuals who suddenly materialized. One was James Ivory, whom you all know because of his connection with India. And the other one was Luca Guadagnino, who's a director who did a film that I had seen already years before called I Am Love. I don't know if it came out in here or not, but it was extremely sensuous and at the same time very patrician. And I liked that. And I said, this might work. This will work. And I met them. They came to me together. And there's a very wonderful moment, because the book has a whole chapter that takes place in Rome. And they said to me, we have redone the script. And James Ivory was the one who was doing the script. And he said, we decided to reduce the size of the trip to Rome, where the 2 lovers go to Rome. And I said, okay, you have to, you're making a movie, I understand. They said, well, we kind of reduced it significantly. I said, that's fine too, you know, you have to, you're the boss. They said, well, we decided to eliminate it altogether. So I said, fine, do what you want. It's not that important as a scene. Of course, I may have had some
It has a literary session, thank you. It's not important at all.
I felt that, you know, it was important to me, but I don't know that the spectator was going to think it was important. So I said, fine, do what you want to do. And then my agent said, this is not happening until the camera starts rolling. And eventually the camera started rolling. And I said, I want to make sure. So I went to the setting in Italy, and they said, come to the set right now. I said, okay. They said, what clothes size do you wear? I said, why is that important? We want you in the film. I said, I'm a ridiculous person. I'm not going to be an actor. Anyway, they made me act in the movie, for those of you who saw the movie. And I've never acted, and I will never act again. But it was fun. The whole thing was a lot of fun. And then a few months later, they said, it's going to play in Sundance. I don't know how many of you know what Sundance. I've never been to Sundance. They said, why don't you come to Sundance? I said, no, it's too cold. And I said, there's no hotel room. I don't want to go. I am not going. So they said, fine, don't come. And I figured, okay, it's going to play in Sundance, and then it's going to disappear as a film. And as the movie is showing in Sundance, the producer of the film is in Sundance, and he is tweeting to me all the tweets that are coming around that are basically overwhelming the internet. And he said, you know, we don't know what's happening, but it's a major thing. I said, yeah, sure. Because I'm a skeptic by nature. And so eventually, as the movie was ending, everybody's crying, everybody's applauding, it's going crazy. And he said, this might be a great film. And I said, okay, yeah, sure. That's who I am. For those of you who know me, that's how I am. And they said, well, it's going to play in Berlin. Do you want to come to Berlin? I said, yes. So I went to Berlin. I saw the movie for the first time. I saw, this is amazing. I had no idea it was going to come out this beautiful. So,
Yeah, so working with James Ivory, I mean, just to, before the release of the film, did you collaborate in the writing of the film?
no. I did not collaborate because I felt that James Ivory is an expert in what he does. He knows exactly what needs to be done. He doesn't need the advice of the author. I gave one piece of advice and one piece of advice only, and both he and the director said, yes, you're right. And so they included that. And that was the only thing. I just didn't want to intervene, and I didn't want to step on people's toes when they are experts in their field. You know.
So how hard is it to let go of the story to make it into a film?
If you are like me, it's the easiest thing in the world. You say, you're doing a film? Good. God bless you, and have fun, and send me a postcard when it's done. No, I had no difficulty. There are some writers who find it very difficult because as the movie sort of matures, they feel that they are losing control, that the scenes they had imagined are not coming out the way they wanted, and they cannot abandon that particular longing that they have to see what was in their head transposed into the movie. I find the opposite is happening. When people tell me, how did you imagine Oliver? I always say, I forgot how I imagine Oliver because I imagine him or I see him only as Armie Hammer because I don't know how else he looks. Whatever I had in my head has totally been erased. And same thing with the father, same thing with the mother, and of course with Elio. Whoever I thought Elio was has disappeared.
It's all Timothy now.
It's Timothy, yes.
Okay. So now the novel, coming back to the novel, you're working on a sequel. That's where only the brave-hearted venture. So how is that panning out, and how did the idea come to you?
Actually, the idea came to me. A lot of people, lots of people say, please write it. Please tell us what happens to those two guys. Where do they go? Why aren't they together? And it was one of my sons who said to me, why don't you just keep the story going? And because I trust him for some reason, I trust my son. And he gave me some advice. I said, well, what I can do is, because as you know, the book ends 20 years after Oliver leaves. And so he said, what happens in the middle? What happens to the father? What happens to Elio? What happens to Oliver? And will they ever come together again? So I decided to go back into the 20 years and to understand what will make the two meet again. I tried to find a motivation. What is it that each still seeks in their life? Oliver is married, has children. Elio has a new love affair. The father has other things happening to him. And basically, I wanted everything to lead into the final reunion, because there has to be a reunion of Oliver and Elio. And so I wanted to bring them together, but I wanted to explain why they're together.
Okay. And before, I believe there are lots of questions from the audience, and Andre wants to take as many as possible. So, you know, this novel has now got a second life almost. So how hard is it for an author when one book of his, I know Out of Egypt is also much celebrated, but one book kind of becomes the star of your, you know, writing life? Do you accept it, embrace it?
Oh, you
fight
have
it?
to. You have to embrace it. But of course, the anxiety that I always feel is that that project belongs to the past. I am involved in many other projects, and they are giving me a lot of anxiety. And the anxiety that a new project brings is nothing like the love that you have for something that was successful. You may never be as successful as you were the first time, but at the same time, your love is going forward as opposed to backward. And so for me, the shadow that Call Me By Your Name casts is not a negative one, but there are more anxieties coming up. A writer's life is not easy. It's full of complications. It's filled with worries and and sometimes even self-hatred. How could I have been so stupid as to write 5 pages like this, which I hate now, and I'm going to throw them in the garbage? You don't throw them, you erase them on the computer. But basically, this happens all the time, and you rewrite and write again. So, as they say about actors, your next act is basically the source of your anxiety. Basically, it's the next one that gives you trouble. The past is behind you, and it's an act that you've already accomplished.
Okay, so on that note, we'll take a couple of questions, and then we'll come back and do a reading. Andre, I've got the book.
Oh.
So after the questions, we'll end with the reading. So if so, there's a hand at the back, the lady with the big bindi. Are there any mics? Where are the mics? Yes. I think a mic is coming to you. Yes, just give us a few seconds.
It's arriving. I can see its arrival.
Yes.
Firstly, I think a lot of us need to pinch ourselves to actually have you here. So I want to thank Mala and her team for getting Andre here. I first read Out of Egypt about a decade back, and then I read Call Me By Your Name, and I was left speechless. And to take a line out of the movie Oliver, I like the way you say things. Because I think the way you articulate tumultuous sexuality and self-expression of love, where you completely surrender to that love without any ego, which is rarely done in literature, I find. And therefore, I think, which was really the base for the book. I want to ask you whether you knew. Now, there are, I think, several peaches. You have heard about the peaches. I'm one of them. So there are several
Oh,
peaches.
you're one of them?
Yes.
There's about 10,000 of you.
Yes. We are 19,000, actually.
Oh, my God.
And so a lot of us are here, and we would love to have you sign our books after this. But I think what all of us really want to know, or it's my question, is in this era of conflict and war and violence, did you realize that your book would really cut across nations and ethnicities and beliefs and religion and actually be the founding stone for love and liberalization? Did it occur to you when you wrote it?
No, it didn't. Because I'm not as I said, I have absolutely no mission in life. Not that way. And I certainly, I'm the last person to take myself seriously. So no, I didn't have a purpose when that happened. However, I have noticed that a lot of people have sort of taken me into their lives, or taken my work, or maybe my voice into their lives, because it has given them something that they always knew was there, but for which the words were not there. And so what I have done, and I think an author's task is limited to that, is that you give people things, not that they never knew, that's easy. It's something that they've always known, but never quite formulated. And that has always been my mission, if I could say it, which is why the work of an author is always very difficult, because you need to articulate as clearly and again as obliquely as possible, the two at the same time, so that you reach somebody, but you don't exactly define them to themselves. You let them do the definition. You give them some of the voice, some of the whispers, and then they'll take it. And that is basically my purpose as a writer. But otherwise, I have no idea that people would essentially clamor around a book that is simply about happy love. I mean, not love in the sense that every love story ends happily, but that there is no violence, there's no prejudice, there's no taboo, there's nothing. All this thing has been sort of stricken out of the typical formula. so that now you are forced to confront something that is actually beautiful and desirable.
Okay.
I think
Yes.
the front.
Yes, can you just come here first? Then I'll just. There are several questions as we had predicted.
Hello, so my name is Dania Shakir, and I wanted to know whether you're going to name the sequel I'll Call You By Mine or not.
No, people have given me, I cannot tell you, about hundreds of possible titles, and the ones I can remember are The Revenge of the Peach, or The Peach Bites Back. I can tell you, some of them are totally obscene, but I'm not going to go there. But I have not decided on the title yet, and we don't know. Usually, I don't decide on titles. It's usually done in collaboration with my editor, and he says, no, this is ugly. This is terrible, Andre. How could you have thought of that? And eventually I said, how about Call Me By Your Name? He said, yes. It came just as a last choice, and I think it makes perfect sense. You're welcome.
Okay. And oh my God, let's get that girl, and then we'll go forwards and backwards. Yeah.
Good afternoon, sir. Hope you're having a lovely time here in Kolkata. So, sir, we have two central characters, Elio and Oliver. But, sir, I feel that Marcia, as a character, is very, very important in this novel. And in the novel, I read, you wrote, would I always experience such solitary guilt in the wake of our intoxicating moments together? Why did not I expect the same thing after Marcia? So why, sir, do you think Elio feels so differently with Oliver and Marcia?
Because I think the thing that most people don't understand, because I think the movie occluded and sort of made it impossible to understand, is that Marcia was not the first girl he slept with. He had a lot of experience with women, and so this was not something new to him. And therefore, he felt that it happened, it's nice, it's beautiful, it's great, but what he felt for Oliver was something totally new. And he didn't know, even the grammar of the language, of the emotional language that he needed in order to reach Oliver. So he doesn't have any words. And essentially, the sexual act for him is different when it comes to Marcia, which is just another girl. He's not necessarily in love with her, though he knows that she might be in love with him. And but he feels totally different with Oliver, and he feels awkward. He feels a bit sort of overwhelmed, whereas he's not overwhelmed with Marcia. There's absolutely nothing there. But it doesn't mean that he doesn't like Marcia, and I think the film makes it seem almost as if, and basically it makes you feel that it's the first time he's had sex with a girl. It's not true at all. At least in my opinion. Yeah.
There's one hand right there at the back, a lady in a blue kurta there. Yes. Let's go to some of the back benchers.
Oh, I see.
Yes.
Well, I have wondered a bit about the role the parents play. They're wonderful parents, of course, but I have just wondered if they were kind of inducting Oliver into Elia's life to sort of take him gently through a rite of passage. Were they kind of organizing this thing in a very nice, wonderful kind of way?
Well, I think, if you want to read into it, you can. For example, the father says, I've never had this, but, I could have. It just never happened. And who knows if there's not some kind of, by proxy, desire to have his son live out something that he has never had. I don't think that's the case. The fact is that the parents see there's a very close friendship between them. And the mother, I think, in my book, the mother has absolutely no personality. And so she's for their going together. Yeah, let them have a little vacation together. And the father, who's a bit more savvy, feels that maybe they need some time off to be together. And that's all it is. He basically puts them in a very expensive hotel in Rome and says, you know, hope you enjoy Rome, etc., etc. And that's where we leave it. I didn't want to analyze the motives of the father because that was beyond actually beyond my imagination. I couldn't even go there.
Oh my God. The lady here with, there are two, so the one in gray. I'm sorry I'm pointing at everyone in this way. Yes, the mic is coming to you.
So I wanted to ask, so there's a part in the book which absolutely broke my heart. Like, there were a lot of parts, but there was this part where, so Elio's on the call with Oliver, and so Elio says, when Oliver says, whatever he says, and Elio says Elio, like, his old game, like, and then Oliver says, no, it's Oliver, and Oliver doesn't say it back, and I just couldn't understand why, because he couldn't have forgotten it.
Actually, he had.
He had?
He had. In the book, he has. Not in the movie. But in the book, Elio plays the old game that they had,
Yeah.
and it suddenly says, oh, he doesn't remember.
He's moved on.
And he's married, he's moved on, yes. So, yeah, I mean, you will find this. You will say a word to a friend, you will exchange a joke, and the friend does not remember the joke at all. You say, how could you have forgotten? It was what bonded us, and they don't remember. It's a terrible thing. It broke my heart when I wrote it.
Thank you.
Okay.
In front, yes, we'll get. Shukriya, please sit in front. Shukriya,
why did you decide to withhold from naming the place where this happens? Because I felt there was a sort of seesaw between making it a sort of universal story and making it very confessional. I'll let you know everything except where this happened. So,
Do you know how any character looks in the book? You don't know. Do you know what their profession is? You don't know. You don't know anything. Because you know what? I hate facts. I detest facts. I hate novels that tell you in the city of such and such, lived an engineer who was married with a wife who was an alcoholic, whose son was retarded, I hate that. So I couldn't decide what city it was going to be placed in. I mean, I was thinking of Bordighera, which starts with a B, but then there's another city called Bogliasco, which also starts with a B. And I said, forget it. I don't know what it's called. And I said, let's call it B. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. You know that there's a house and there's a beach and there are rocks, and that's all you need to know. And guess what? The movie, there's no beach, there are no rocks, and it makes no difference. And I'm all for that. Because I hate these sort of mythological and monolithic facts that seem to make it easier for you to imagine what's going on. And in fact, what they are, it's just travestied verisimilitude, and I hate it.
We'll take 2 more questions, and for the rest, he's back tomorrow. The girl in the stripy top.
The one behind.
You got my chance.
Hi.
Hi. Oh my God, I'm overwhelmed. Yeah, I forgot my question. Yeah, I'm Swati Dekha, and whenever someone talks to me, I introduce myself as the Call Me By Name fangirl, because I can obsess about it all day long without stopping, unless someone tells me to stop. So I was just wondering, when Oliver leaves, after the summer vacation, he leaves with a picture of the monad sperm. And then later, when Elio meets him, after all those years, he finds it in Oliver's office. So what is the significance, drawing this circle? What is the significance of this?
That's a great question.
I'll tell you what it is. And it comes from something that happened to me once when there was a picture of me as a child. And then one day I go to visit a distant aunt, and I see that picture of me as a child in her living room. And I realized that this picture, which was mine and which my mother had given her, has been in her possession longer than it has been in my possession. And that's the same thing that happens with the picture of Monet's burn. It is totally Oliver's. It used to belong to Elio, but it has been not disappropriated, but it's as if the identity of something that was totally Elio's has been living with Oliver longer than it has ever been with Elio. And that is one of the ways in which, in the book, I try to spell how time works for us. I didn't want to say 10 years have gone by and with the length of long sun. I didn't want to do that, okay? But instead, when you see this used to be mine, but it's been yours for much longer. And I did the same thing with the character of Vimini, the girl. She dies. Big deal. Okay, I like her, okay? But the point is that when you hear that she died, it means that many years have gone by. And when you hear that Anchise, the gardener, has died, then you realize, oh my God, things happen that way in life. Time must have happened in the story without my having to spell it out for you. And so that was one of the tricks that, writers have.
The rest of the conversation is at the author's lounge. Please, one last question, then we'll do the quick reading, and we have to get into the next session. This girl here. Just behind you.
It's behind you.
Good afternoon, sir.
Hi.
Hi. So in the song "Mystery of Love," there is a reference made to Hephaestion, which says, "Like Hephaestion who died, Alexander's lover." So Hephaestion was Alexander's most trusted general, but he was always known as his lover. So do you think we can allude this reference to that with Oliver and Elio's relationship, that we don't know about Oliver that much? So how can we allude to that?
Except that, Alexander kills Hephaestion. He actually kills him, okay? So it's not a very nice metaphor for the book. But I think, yes, there is a kind of, they're extremely, and this is, I think, what I wanted to explore. Beyond the same-sex issue, it was really the sense of intimacy. Intimacy is probably the most powerful thing that any human being feels in their lives. And when you feel intimacy with someone, in other words, there are no doors that are closed. All the windows are open. There are no secrets. There must not be secrets. When you have that feeling, it's probably the best thing in the world, because it is reborn every day. And it's the best definition of love that I can give. When you have the sense that whatever I'm most embarrassed about myself, I can say it, and they will accept me and give me strength. And I wanted that to be the root of their relationship. To call it, sexual love or da-da-da-da, I hate those terms. It means nothing to me. The fact is that they are really each other. They are each other. And that was a concept that was, you can't name it, and I didn't want to name it.
Okay, on that note, I think I found the page, if everyone was wondering why I was ferreting through the book. Yes.
All I can say is that I'm very embarrassed to read this passage because it's the passage that Michael Stuhlbarg leads in the movie. He doesn't read it, he says it. And he says it better than I ever will. So forgive me. This is the father speaking. You had a beautiful friendship, maybe more than a friendship, and I envy you. In my place, most parents would hope the whole thing goes away or pray that their sons lands on their feet soon enough. But I am not such a parent. In your place, if there is pain, nurse it. And if there is a flame, don't snuff it out. Don't be brutal with it. Withdrawal can be a terrible thing when it keeps us awake at night. And watching others forget us sooner than we'd want to be forgotten is no better. We rip out so much of ourselves to be cured of things faster than we should, that we go bankrupt by the age of 30 and have less to offer each time we start with someone new. But to feel nothing so as to feel not to feel anything, what a waste. then let me say one more thing. It will clear the air. I may have come close, but I never had what you had. Something always held me back or stood in the way. How you live your life is your business, but remember, our hearts and our bodies are given to us only once. Most of us can't help but live as though we've got two lives to live. One is the mock-up, the other the finished version, and then there are all those versions in between. But there's only one, and before you know it, your heart is worn out. And as for your body, there comes a point when no one looks at it, much less wants to touch it. Right now, there's sorrow. I don't envy the pain, but I envy you the pain. Thank you.
I don't think there's a better way to end this session. Thank you so much, Andre.
Thank you, Malavika. Thank you so much.
So websites of writers do work, their emails often get answered. So my faith in the web universe, you restored it.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you all so much, really.
And Andre will be back tomorrow evening for another session. And book signings at the bookstore, please, because we'll be swinging into our next session.